In a small town nestled between the looming shadows of ancient trees, Marshall and David, two close friends, found themselves engrossed in a late-night video game session. The flickering screen illuminated their faces, and their laughter echoed through the dark, empty streets. As the hours ticked away, their cravings intensified, and they decided to embark on a quest for pizza. The nearest pizza place was the familiar, cozy Papa Tony's Pizzeria, a beloved late-night haven for the town's residents. Marshall and David were regulars there, but this night would be like no other. The clock struck midnight as they approached the pizzeria. The neon sign overhead buzzed ominously, casting eerie, shifting shadows that danced along the pavement. They entered, expecting the usual bustling atmosphere, but the scene that greeted them was far from ordinary. Inside, the pizzeria was dimly lit, with only one employee visible. The girl behind the counter appeared to be in her early 20s, with striking beauty that was impossible to ignore. Yet, despite her physical charm, there was an unsettling aura that hung about her, casting a heavy, foreboding shadow upon the entire place. It was as if her beauty concealed something sinister beneath. The two friends hesitated briefly, but their hunger for pizza overcame their unease. They approached the counter, and the girl's deep, soul-penetrating gaze fixed upon them, sending shivers down their spines. Her eyes, once a vivid shade of blue, seemed darker now, as though they held secrets too horrifying to be revealed. Ignoring their growing unease, Marshall and David placed their order, a large pepperoni pizza and 2 Cokes, and took a seat at their usual station. The silence within the pizzeria was palpable, broken only by the sound of the girl's footsteps as she prepared their meal in the dimly lit kitchen. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the pizzeria grew increasingly oppressive. Marshall and David exchanged nervous glances, but tried to shake off their discomfort. It was during this time that they noticed something peculiar, an old photograph hanging on the wall, nearly hidden in the shadows. The photograph depicted a vibrant scene from a bygone era. A group of young people, including the girl behind the counter, smiled and posed together, seemingly carefree. The colors in the photograph were vivid, but the faces were drained of life. It was as if the very essence of their existence had been drained, leaving only a haunting image of what once was. Their unease deepened, and they contemplated leaving. But before they could make a move, the girl emerged from the kitchen, carrying their order. She placed the pizza and Cokes on the table in front of them, her demeanor colder than ever. With trembling hands, they reached for the pizza, and as they took their first bite, they realized something was horribly wrong. The taste was off, and the pepperoni had a strange metallic tang. Panic set in as they realized they were not eating pizza, but something far more disturbing. Desperation overcame them, and they attempted to flee, but the door wouldn't budge. The girl stood in the doorway, her beauty now a facade for the malevolence that radiated from her. She revealed her true nature, her teeth elongating into sharp, glistening fangs as her eyes turned an otherworldly crimson. Marshall and David were trapped, prisoners in a sinister reality they could never have imagined. The girl's chilling laughter filled the room as she advanced, her intentions clear. They were her prey. As the night wore on, the pizzeria's walls seemed to close in around them, the darkness growing denser with each passing moment. The two friends became mere shadows of their former selves, their lives drained away to sustain the insidious creature that had lured them in. The once beloved Papa Tony's Pizzeria, now a place of unspeakable horror, would continue to draw unsuspecting victims into its inescapable darkness, as the malevolent girl in her 20s remained eternally beautiful, eternally hungry, and eternally cursed to feed on the souls of those who dared enter her lair. And so, in the heart of the small town, the legend of the Midnight Pizza Parlor endured, a grim reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. Martha and her granddaughter Olivia were nestled in their cozy, quaint house in a remote small town. Olivia, a city girl, was visiting her grandmother for a weekend, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of her urban life. The time was nearing 11:30 p.m. when Olivia's stomach growled, demanding attention. Their small town offered limited dining options, and the only place open at this hour was a distant pizza corner. The rain tapped on their windows, adding an eerie atmosphere to the night. Resolute, Olivia decided that a late-night pizza run was their best option for satisfying her hunger. She convinced her grandmother, and together they embarked on a long walk through the quiet, dimly lit streets, the darkness intensified by the heavy rain. As they strolled, Olivia felt a sensation creeping up her spine. It was the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She brushed it off as mere paranoia, attributing it to her unfamiliarity with the small town. Martha, on the other hand, clung to Olivia's arm, sensing the same unsettling presence, but decided to keep her fears to herself so as not to alarm her granddaughter. With every step, the feeling of being observed grew stronger, the raindrops drumming on the pavement matching the rhythm of their anxious hearts. Olivia occasionally glanced over her shoulder, her eyes darting into the shadows, but nothing was ever there. They pressed on, drawing closer to the solitary pizza corner, a beacon of warm light amidst the dark, rainy night. When they arrived, a bell above the door chimed as they entered, announcing their presence to the lone pizza maker behind the counter. He was a tall, lanky man with disheveled hair and hollow eyes that seemed to fixate on the newcomers. His smile was forced, devoid of warmth, and Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze bore into her soul. They placed their order, and the pizza maker retreated to the kitchen, leaving them alone in the dimly lit dining area. The atmosphere was heavy with silence and an underlying sense of dread. Olivia and Martha exchanged uneasy glances but tried to ignore their discomfort. Their pizza arrived, and as they took their first bites, the rain outside grew torrential, battering the windows and howling in the wind. Olivia's unease intensified as she felt a shadow looming over their table. She looked up to see the pizza maker standing there, staring at her with a malevolent grin. Martha gasped, clutching her chest in fear. The pizza maker's eyes were different now, dark and empty, devoid of any trace of humanity. He extended a trembling hand toward Olivia, his fingers stretching unnaturally, as though beckoning her into the abyss. Olivia's heart raced, and she could no longer dismiss the feeling of being watched. She realized that the presence she had sensed earlier was emanating from the sinister figure before her. Fear clutched her like a vice, and she stood up, knocking over her chair. She grabbed her grandmother's hand, pulling her away from the grotesque pizza maker. With a jolt, they bolted towards the door, but it refused to budge. Panic set in as they struggled with the unyielding entrance. The pizza maker's dissonant laughter echoed through the room, his body contorting in unnatural ways as he approached. Desperation filled their hearts as they finally forced the door open, drenched by the relentless rain. They fled into the night, not looking back, leaving behind the haunted pizza corner and its deranged owner. They never spoke of that night, the unspeakable terror that lurked in that seemingly innocent establishment. To this day, the memory of that eerie walk in the rain, the sinister pizza maker, and the unsolved mystery of the locked door continue to haunt them. Olivia's weekend in the small town turned into a nightmarish ordeal, forever etched in their memories as a night of unspeakable horror and despair. Once upon a chilling night in the quaint town of Vipro, a small family of 3 gathered in their cozy living room. The firelight danced upon their faces, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The family consisted of a caring mother, a protective father, and their curious 12-year-old son named David. The clock ticked relentlessly as they watched a horror movie on their vintage television. The anticipation of the jump scares added a thrilling edge to their evening. They had planned to accompany their movie with frozen pizza, but their hopes were dashed when they found an empty freezer. It was a strange twist of fate. Their evening had taken an unexpected turn. With cravings for pizza weighing heavily on their minds, they decided to order some. They picked up the phone, but the revelation that no one was willing to deliver to Vipro at this hour left them feeling marooned in their remote town. They knew the nearest pizza shop was a 45-minute drive away, and the clock already read midnight. Their stomachs rumbled with hunger and their taste buds ached for a slice of cheesy heaven. The family, driven by their collective desire for pizza, decided to embark on an impromptu adventure. They didn't mind the late hour or the eerie darkness that had settled over Vipro. They piled into their car, and the engine roared to life as they set off on the winding road toward the pizza shop. The town of Vipro lay still, shrouded in the inky blackness of the night. The only sounds were the haunting echoes of the wind as it whistled through the trees and the distant hoots of an owl. As they drove further away from the safety of their home, the darkness grew deeper, and a sense of foreboding overcame them. 45 minutes passed, and they reached the pizzeria, its neon sign buzzing like a beacon in the night. The warm, inviting aroma of pizza wafted through the air, and they couldn't wait to savor their late-night feast. The family ordered their favorite pizzas and took a seat in the corner of the nearly empty restaurant. It felt strange. There were no other customers around, and the staff was unusually somber. But their hunger overshadowed any sense of unease, and they began to devour their pizzas. As they enjoyed their meal, a chilling silence enveloped the restaurant. The absence of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of cutlery was unnerving. The family glanced around and noticed the staff watching them with an eerie intensity, their eyes dark and lifeless. Unease settled over the family like a heavy fog. They realized that something was horribly wrong. David, their young son, shivered as he looked out the window, but the streets were now devoid of life, like a ghost town. Panic began to claw at their hearts, and they decided to leave. The family paid their bill and walked out into the night, the air now thick with an eerie stillness. They hurried back to their car, only to find it covered in a strange, sticky substance. Panic turned into terror as they realized that they were trapped, the car immobilized by some sinister force. Suddenly, the staff from the pizzeria appeared, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of hunger and malevolence. They advanced toward the terrified family with unnatural speed and strength. The family huddled together, their hearts pounding as they were surrounded by these nightmarish figures. The horror movie they had been watching earlier seemed like child's play compared to the terrifying reality they now faced. As the staff lunged at them, the family fought for their lives, but the odds were stacked against them. In the end, the night swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but a chilling emptiness in the town of Vipro. The family's screams went unheard in the inky blackness, their fate sealed by their insatiable hunger for a simple pizza. And so, Vipro remained shrouded in darkness, a town where time stood still. And the only thing that lingered was the haunting memory of the family that vanished on that fateful, pizza-starved night.